We've got ourselves an absolutely massive OTA here, friends, and bunch of changes, a ton of changes, including the end of the Avengers and X-Men event. So if you're playing that X-Men Surfer deck that I absolutely loved and I shared with the community, don't play it anymore. It's trash now because without the +1, it just doesn't compete. But maybe with these buffs, some new cards will compete, like Captain Marvel, which was once one of the best cards in the game when the Silky Smooth archetype first burst onto the scene with Elsa and Silk, of course. And then it got nerfed to a 4/4, and we just never saw it again. And maybe, just maybe, we can improve on that 43% win rate with a 4/5 Captain Marvel. Elsa is kind of on its way back to some degree with the recent change in the patch. Angela is a shell of its former self, but anyways, that whole archetype got hit pretty hard. So giving some power to Captain Marvel, potentially allowing it to flourish in other styles of decks, might actually be really beneficial. So I love to see Cap Marvel getting some love. It's one of my favorite cards in the game. I would have liked to have gone it to 4/6, but then again, I'm greedy as hell, and I just love the card. So Cap Marvel going from a 4/4 to a 4/5. We go to Apocalypse now. This is interesting because we know that discard's performing very well. It's currently the second best archetype in the game behind Thanos, who, hint, hint, might get a little clap in the cheeks as well. But Apocalypse, they're identifying it as the kind of, not soul, but one of the outliers of discard in terms of win rate, which is interesting because it is sprinkled in a lot of different archetypes. If you're running like the Corvus Glaive stuff, it's in there. If you're running the Helicarrier stuff, it's often in there too. It seems like this very consistent player in discard, which it should be, right? Like it's Apocalypse. That's what discard's built around. 2 power off is not the end of the world. Apocalypse is often getting above 20 power anyways. It's doing its job, so I can kind of see where they're coming from. I don't know if this really like solves the problem of discard, but it is a nerf, and it is tentative. And I would rather they do this than take off power from like Sif or Colleen Wing or even Corvus Glaive for that matter. So I think they're doing the right thing by taking a little bit off of Apocalypse while still keeping it a very interesting card. But ultimately, we'll have to see where discard ends up. I still think it'll be absolutely fine. Not fine is going to be Thanos. This is actually a huge kick in the pants. This has been by far the most powerful card in Thanos' arsenal, Mind Stone. Changing a stone from a 1 cost to a 2 cost is very significant. And not only that, but often Mind Stone represented a snap opportunity for the Thanos player. If they started with Mind Stone in their hand, like they had a huge advantage over everyone else. And Mockingbird only amplified that because with Mind Stone and then, you know, the 2 stones you've drawn, Mockingbird's discounted by 3 by turn 3. It's actually insane how fast you get Mockingbird out with just the Mind Stone, right? If you, of course, have Mockingbird in hand. So keeping those things in consideration, something had to give. And so they do target Mind Stone. It was by far the outlier of Thanos stones. But like, it's kind of crazy to think how like Thanos has been hit so many times with the stones, and maybe we're going to see an archetype one day where it's like, hey, I'm actually just going to get Thanos to 20 power. Like maybe that's my strategy. But as of right now, no one even plays Thanos. Like Thanos barely actually hits the board. It's all about the damn stones and the synergies it provides. So huge hit to Thanos here in the Mind Stone, as they note in the developer notes. And Psylock also, I think it took a bit of a stray, but obviously it's performing very well in Thanos as well. As you start to see a bit of a shift in the Thanos archetypes, you're starting to see once again like that moving towards the Pro X and the Alliance, and like there's a lot of changing winds in Thanos, and Psylock was a major component of that. Ironically, Psylock was being cut from decks for a while, then it made itself back, and it has been an outlier in consistent performance. Its win rate, its meta share is very high. Unfortunately, you know, I don't think the 1 power is going to hurt it too much. It still does its thing, but it is worth noting that they did buff it from a 2/1 to a 2/2, and maybe that was a little too much. But I actually just surprised me. I didn't think Psylocke was going to get hit by anything. So Psylocke taking a bit of a stray, but statistically, according to Second Dinner, this was absolutely necessary. And I'd hope to see Psylocke back at 2/2. I thought it was a great card at 2/2. So yeah, what do I know? Adam Warlock, the meme stays true. Look at this win rate. 39% with the rework. Absolutely horrendous card. Going to a 5/5, and they do note in the developer note here that they're targeting Cerebro 5. Cerebro 5 was once a legitimate deck, thanks to, well, Miss Marvel. After Miss Marvel got brought down to a 4, C5 was like, well, what the hell do we do now, right? We have no power. No, now you get to maybe draw cards, I guess. I don't know, man. You might be coping here to think that Adam Warlock's going to be good in a deck. They do note here that they could get to 5/6 before it's like actually legit, but they want to give C5 a bit of something because it lost Miss Marvel. But like, even at 5/6, does Adam Warlock really make that much of a difference? I don't want to say anything because obviously card draw is valuable, it's powerful. But then again, I like when people play Crystal on me. I get a card, I'm like, hey, thanks, man. I know you're playing Tribunal, by the way, but that's fine, or Hell or whatever. But like, Ah, man, they're being tentative, and that's fair with a card like Adam Warlock, but ultimately it probably still sucks. We'll have to see if C5 shakes it up enough. Because I said that, of course, it'll absolutely dominate, and I don't think anybody will be complaining. Okay, we got a massive amount of changes. This is a huge array of changes across the entirety of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Even in low MMRs, they're terrible cards. In fact, some of these cards have no stats whatsoever. Look at Rocket Raccoon's win rate, and this is the stats I could find on Untapped, and there's barely any because no one plays this damn card. Negative 0.83 cube rate, a 22% win rate. So this is basically like someone installs Untapped, and they go into, ladder, and they basically get crunched over and over again by other players. And so, like, I feel so bad. These stats are horrible. So it goes from a 1-2 to a 1-1, so it loses 1 power natively, but now it gains 2 additional power if it lands the hit. It goes from +2 power to +4, so that's a 1-5 if you guess correctly. It's almost worth the risk, right? Especially maybe in the late game when you start to be able to identify where they might be playing. 1-5 is a lot of power, right? So, Star-Lord, very interesting. Literally no stats available. Could not fight. So that means 2 people did not play the same deck in Untapped in the last 30. It's crazy. Star-Lord is completely invisible. And it goes from +3 power to +4. Just a straight up buff. Still 2-2. No stats. It's actually hilarious to see. And it doesn't even stop there because Groot has no stats either. I couldn't even believe it. Groot has no stats either. Goes from a 3-4 to a 3-3, but gains an additional power overall by getting +4 instead of +2. So again, they're all +4s, by the way. The Guardians of the Galaxy are all getting +4s from Rocket all the way to Drax and Gamora. Drax going from a 4-6 to a 4-5, but going from a +2 to a +4. So once again, really amplifying that need to hit the target, although like now like he has a little more downside risk because he's weaker, right? So if you miss, you don't get that buff, but if you hit it, it's that much more special. 4-9, can't even get Shang-Chi'd. It's basically a buff. Stats, what stats? Who the hell's playing Drax? And then we finally got Gamora. Thank God someone was playing Gamora out there. 45% win rate, negative cube rate, and almost none of the meta share. But you know what? She goes from a 5-7 to a 5-8, going from a +5 to a +4. So it's end up pretty steady there. And maybe a nerf to like the Odin archetypes. I was using Gamora every once in a while, but ultimately the Guardians of the Galaxy, they needed something. It's pretty cool that they're getting something though. Like this is a nice change. They're probably still bad, but at least we get to try and huff some hopium with the Guardians of the Galaxy. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're not subscribed already. We'll see you in that next Marvel Snap video.